The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Grant Roberts.
Well, there's a member who should know all about the Beltway, because it's time for Bill English to get out of Messines Road once in a while. Get out of Messines Road, lovely part of Wellington Central, I might say, but it's time for him to get out of Messines Road and actually see what's going on in New Zealand, because an out-of-touch government is going to deliver an out-of-touch speech like this. Here's some facts and figures for Bill English, Mr. Speaker. Unemployment in Northland, 8%. 8% of New Zealanders unemployed in Northland. If he wants to talk about statistics about how people are going, how about this for a statistic? 13.2% of Māori unemployed. 13% of Pacifica people unemployed. 22.3% of 15 to 19-year-olds unemployed. That's the legacy of the national government. That's the legacy of a government that looks after its mates and does not care about the rest of New Zealand. And if Mr. English wants to talk about the public service and what we hear from the public service, well, what we hear from the public service is, yes, they do work hard. And they will work for the government of the day. But if you cut the police budget year on year, you're not going to get the proper service that New Zealanders expect from them. If you cut the courts budget every year, New Zealanders won't get fair access to justice. If you cut MFE and DOC's budget every year, then the environment will decline. And that is the record of the national government, Mr. Speaker. This is not a government that cares about spreading fairly the benefits of economic recovery. This is a government that says, we and our mates will hang on to that. And this is the statistic that John Key should worry about. CEO pay is now 26.5 times that of the average employee in companies in New Zealand. That's up over 4% since National took office. That's the legacy of the national government. The benefits accruing to the very wealthy while others struggle. 46% of New Zealanders got no pay increase in the past year. Survey out today that says 49% of employers are not expecting to give a pay rise next year. That is not a fair share of economic recovery. And we know on this side of the House that what National is doing is what National always does: manage the economy for them and their mates. They're not trying to lift the aspirations. Here's Nick Smith interjecting. How about making housing affordable for New Zealanders? How about actually that as a measure of inequality? Once upon a time, Dr. Smith, if you worked in a job in New Zealand and you worked hard, you would be able to come home with enough money to save up and buy your own home. That dream's gone. That dream's gone for the next generation. And Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of talk at the moment about what will be the defining characteristics of a future government. And I can tell you today that the defining characteristic of a future Labor government will be that we are for future generations. We're not looking in the rearview mirror like the National Party. We're saying a future generation of New Zealanders deserves to be able to buy their own home. That's something New Zealanders have held on to for years and years, is the fact if you work hard, you save hard, you'll be able to buy your own home. That dream is gone. And Nick Smith is presiding over reports and accords and gazetting things and consents. People don't live in consents, Dr. Smith. They live in houses. And he's not building enough houses to make them affordable for New Zealanders to buy today. Mr. Speaker, the legacy of this government is one where they look after the few and the wealthy get wealthier and most New Zealanders struggle. It's only those at the very, very top who benefit from the national government. And Mr. Speaker, that needs to change in New Zealand. We need to get back to the core egalitarian values that have stood New Zealand in good stead. That means that everybody gets the right to a good education, that we make sure that state schools are the best schools in the world, that we make sure that we invest in the best teachers in the world, not come up with some half-baked, harebrained scheme to take a principal out of school for a couple of days a week because it sounds good, but actually investing in every single school and making sure that every single person in New Zealand who wants to work can get a job. And having an ambition for full employment, as the Labor Party does, is not something that John Key should laugh off and say it's impossible. It's only impossible, Mr. Speaker, because the government doesn't have the political will to stand up and say, we will make that our priority. Why not pick up the Labour Party's policy from the last election that I give credit to Phil Goff for? Why have 18 and 19-year-olds been paid the dole when you could give a subsidy for an apprenticeship so that that person can get skills and work? That would be a policy that a government who really cared about getting New Zealanders into work would undertake. But they won't, because they'll sit on their laurels and let 8% of people who live in Northland be unemployed. That's not on, Mr. Speaker. And what's required is a proper regional development policy. Not another set of Mr. Joyce's lovely glossy documents, but actually practical work on the ground that will make sure that jobs can be created, and that is what the Labour Party is committed to. It's about getting alongside regions and saying, we'll support you to create those jobs. What it isn't is on high Stephen Joyce saying, I've got a silver bullet, and I'm going to put that in play, the oil and gas industry. It's not enough. Disaster recovery is also not an economic plan, Mr. Joyce. Disaster recovery is what is driving the so-called economic growth in New Zealand. If Mr. Joyce was actually committed to this, he'd be supporting a region like, I don't know, Dunedin, making sure that they've still got a manufacturing capability at Hillside, making sure that they've still got research and development underway at Invermay. But no, he washes his hands of those regions because it doesn't fit his narrow ideological frame about what makes for a silver bullet. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party is interested in innovation, investment and industry in regions. We are going to make sure that we invest in the infrastructure. They don't care about the people of Gisborne. They don't care about keeping a rail line open up there. They don't care about the people of Appropriation and making sure that they've got a wharf where they can actually take their aquaculture products and bring them back into port. They don't care about that, Mr. Speaker, because they want to dictate from on high what they think will work, and it won't, Mr. Speaker. We want to see industry development plans. We've already announced them in manufacturing and in forestry. There's more coming in ICT and other areas, because we know that a government should be an active partner in the economy, not sitting back deciding that the market will look after it all. That doesn't work, Mr. Speaker. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. This man over here says, make up your mind. He should make up his mind about whether he actually supports New Zealanders or whether he wants to dictate to them from his little narrow ideological frame, Mr. Speaker, and we know that it won't work. Mr. Speaker, we are debating the supplementary estimates, and I want to say this about the government's budget. And Bill English has been quite fond lately of making comparisons to the All Blacks in terms of how we do things around here. Well, if you put off your ACC premium reductions of nearly $500 million for a year, that's a little bit like saying the points the All Blacks scored in the second test in Dunedin are going to be fast-forwarded to the game in Hamilton because we want to make that result look a little better than the one in Dunedin. That's the kind of smoke and mirrors in this budget. We reduce the government reduces the Canterbury recovery budget by $500 million, finds a never-seen-before $375 million loan for a transport project in Auckland, all to get themselves to their wafer-thin surplus to make it look good. And that's the national government. Smoke and mirrors, making sure they look good without the substance really being there. Mr. Speaker, what we need is a focus on core Kiwi values. Work, home and families. Making sure there is an opportunity to do a job. If the jobs are there, they should be done. Making sure that New Zealanders get access to homes, to buy homes, to warm, dry rentals. And making sure that families and children in particular have the best start in life. Mr. Speaker, we heard from Bill English today that apparently inequality is not getting worse. Well, how about this from the Salvation Army report? We know that between the last two census, the median income of somebody in Mission Bay or St Heliers went up by $6,100 in that period of time. If you were living in Mangere or Tahahu, it went down by $200, up by $6,100 in the wealthy and rich bits of Auckland, and down by $200 in South Auckland. That's how inequality grows, Mr. Speaker. It grows because a government lets that happen. It doesn't lift the minimum wage. It doesn't work towards a living wage. It doesn't introduce a capital gains tax. It doesn't make top tax rate payers pay a fair rate. That's what National's done. It's created those two Aucklands. New Zealanders consumers need to know that wherever they live, they have a fair chance at life and a fair chance of getting ahead, and that's what they'll get with a Labor government.
Mr Speaker.
I call the Honourable Minister Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, where does one begin after that? Because I've never heard such an empty pile of baseless rhetoric in a long time. In fact, since I last heard my last